podcast.
Yeah.
Welcome. We are here live from Podcast Movement in Denver. It's both my first time to attend Podcast Movement Conference and my friend Amy Fritz. I was at Podcast Movement.
The Wi-Fi sucks.
Oh, yes. Tell us about the Wi-Fi, Amy. What's going on with the Wi-Fi here at Podcast Movement?
Surprise! We sit down in the Wi-Fi. They give us the username and password. It's sponsored by the Ramsey Solutions Organization. So we have to type in "dead is dumb, cash is king" on my phone. It felt sort of gross. But good news, the Wi-Fi sucks. It really does.
This is how we still believe in God, because
Thank you, Lord. It's a sign from the
there
Lord.
are just signs everywhere that the Spirit is moving. So, yes. If you have followed Amy at all, and I encourage you to do so, her podcast, Untangled Faith, details her husband's experience, her friend's experience, and her experience, although she didn't work, it's not called Ramsey Solutions, it's called something else.
Well, the legal name is the Lampo Group, but they
Group.
go by Ramsey Solutions.
They go by Ramsey Solutions. So it's a little confusing, but many of you may have heard of Entree Leadership conferences or read any of the books or experienced their podcasts. But go to Untangled Faith, hear all the stories. It's one of those things where, here at A World of Difference, we bring our differences around the table, we celebrate our differences, and it's those differences that give us different perspectives to help us make a difference. Amy is a difference maker, and the way that she has done it in this particular situation is to be a part of whistleblowing about some of the difficult things that she and her family experience and her friends, but also what that entails is not only the courage to say what needs to be said, but it also means that you are going to encounter people, and we're going to talk about this today, who don't want to know. And so I would love to ask you, Amy, my first question for you is, I think sometimes about that quote, and it's been attributed to a lot of different people, but it's like, good people do nothing, that's where evil thrives, right?
Yeah.
And so tell us about why it would be important for somebody to want to know when something has happened that's bad, evil, nefarious, or even just mildly toxic. Why do people need to know?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for
Uh-huh.
having me.
You're
And
welcome.
so I told my story on your podcast
You
not
did.
long ago,
Mhm.
and so that was really great. As we were talking about having this conversation, we were talking about just that angsty thing it is for people when they benefit from somebody or they enjoy something, to hear that it has been harmful to somebody. And it's complicated. There's we have been the people that have had to decide whether we wanted to hear something or not, because we knew it would require something of us. And so why is it important to know? I think well, first of all, there's no prescription for what you should do with information. It is so very situationally specific, but I mean, it's so that you can make it, so that you can say, I knew, I sought the Lord for what to do next. And you won't find yourself in that situation later that was like, if I had only known, I would have done something different. So this is if you had only known. We're giving you a chance. People are giving you a chance to know something, so that you don't say, if you had told us, Amy, if you had told us, Lori, we would have done something different. Whatever that different is, it's going to look different for different people, but I think it's really an empowering moment and a really scary moment for people.
Yeah, I think it's important that you recognize it's all the feels, right? It does take courage. Not everybody has courage at every single moment. I don't. I'm an Enneagram 8, and people just assume I'm just living out of courage all the time. I'm not. I have fear too, and I know that you do too. And sometimes you can be brave in the midst of fear, and sometimes you can just borrow somebody else's courage or somebody else's faith or hope, right? But we can be mixed with a lot of feelings in those moments, and so in an effort to have a judgment-free zone, we want people to be psychologically safe, and at the same time, when we hold this information that when good people do nothing, that's when evil thrives. So we're going to talk a little bit too today about why the conversation around complicity and collusion is important. What does it mean to you when somebody goes and maybe speaks on stage with, for example, Dave Ramsey or some other, maybe toxic leader who's been abusing their people? How do you process that? Do you
Yeah.
have any advice? What should people do?
Oh man, that's a hard question. Yeah, I have big feelings about it, right? First of all, I wonder if they know. And like, I can't expect everyone to know everything I know. Even though there are some things that are public, not everybody knows everything. So I sort of have to categorize it in that sort of thing. I also have to put in my brain, like, what are the reasons for this? Like, is it really an endorsement that they're giving by standing up there?
Right.
Or is something else happening?
Yeah.
It's complicated. Like, I would love to have a conversation with them. Like, because like, just to say, hey, like, tell me how you decide who you partner with. Like, do you vet them? Like,
Right.
I mean, do we? Like,
Right.
Like, how do we know that the people that we are having on our podcasts, sitting next to, sharing their books?
Yeah.
How do we know? Like, we don't know until we know. And like, how much work do we expect of a public person?
Yeah.
Before they get up on a stage? I really don't know, because we've been so hurt by high profile people. We know, like, we're more reticent to like give a stamp of approval. More reticent, even when we're happy in a church, to like say, hey, we love our church, come to our church, our pastor's amazing. Like, we just don't do that anymore because we know that there are things we don't know. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think I kind of filter all of these things, and I think the more somebody knows and the more public information is out there, the more I'm disappointed if a person partners with somebody. Like, if it's really public, ridiculously available, I have to think somebody's purposefully closing their eyes. And that bothers me a whole lot more than like the really obscure thing nobody knows about.
I'm with you on that. Once again, this conversation is really complicated. And so, like Amy mentioned, there's a high profile person who's not only big in, business world where she lives in Nashville, but is big in the faith space of Christianity. That's, her faith that she practices, but also even in the podcast world, being so there's like multiple ways this intersects, or book publishing, all that. It kind of, and so when you see the collusion happening, if you're not the kind of person who's been abused or hurt in a significant way, or been in a toxic workplace environment with somebody who has abused you, many of your friends and people that you know and care about, it may be kind of hard to understand the experience of someone who's been on the receiving end of that toxic behavior, that abusive behavior, and then watch somebody that you know and love and care about speak on a stage with them or have them on their podcast or endorse them. Maybe if you could help us understand a little bit more about maybe your personal experience of what happens with you when you see that, or you have friends also and you've heard their feelings. What does that look like?
I mean, I have a couple things that I was thinking. I just had a conversation on my podcast with Karen Swallow Pryor where I asked her, like, what do you say to the person that's saying, man, I really love this person, and I see them like being a part of an organization that I feel like is really unhealthy, and maybe it's led by a dangerous person, or like, and I'm like, tell me about like that, because I know like she worked at Liberty for a really, really long time, and she said, she was glad to answer that question, and of course she had a really specific sort of situation as a faculty member, which is its own thing,
Right.
But first of all, I have to say, I don't know everything that's happening behind the scenes. They might be using their influence as much as they can to advocate for goodness. And so I have to categorize that.
Yeah.
I did put that in one part of my brain and say, this could be happening. I'm not going to call somebody out in the absence of that information.
Right.
I do not know. They could be part of an underground railroad of helping people escape that, and they're just keeping a low profile. And them actually making a huge statement would put that at risk. I don't know that. And so to say, maybe something's happening, I don't know, is helpful. But then there's also the thing where I hope people realize that when they stay somewhere, or they're speaking on a stage next to somebody, they're sharing they're on a flyer with somebody, right? Like their pictures next to somebody, and in advertising, is that it will send a message of oftentimes of endorsement, whether they want to or not.
Exactly.
Because somebody is looking at Lori and saying, I trust Lori. Lori is speaking with this person, or Lori
Amy,
just
she's so
shared this
toxic.
person. Yeah,
Right.
Lori is sitting next to Amy. Like, she must be okay.
Yeah.
I can, because I trust Lori. I trust this person.
Right.
Like, Lori is the canary in the coal mine for somebody, and
Yeah.
you may be somebody's canary in the coal mine. And if somebody's
Right.
looking at you and saying, I think something might be wrong, but as long as Amy is still there, I bet it's okay. I think
Yeah.
Amy knows more than I do, and she's still there. If Amy leaves,
Right.
then we have a situation here. We have
Yeah.
to do something. So, I mean, there's no one right answer.
Yeah. I was somebody's canary in the coal mine. At least more than one at my church, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And so I know what that feels like. And if you're not familiar with that, if you're an English speaker but not from the U.S., just
Yeah.
Google it. It'll make sense. But honestly, like when I think about what is a stealth Harriet Tubman in an underground railroad look like, Harriet Tubman wasn't in the system. She was outside of it in order to rescue people and bring them out. And so it'd almost be like those people that had the homes that would kind of be along the way that were sort of somewhat apart but not apart. It's like it takes all these different kinds of people.
Yeah.
I do long to see, and I don't know about you, I long to see that megachurch pastor out there who isn't toxic, who's going to speak on the stage with another megachurch pastor who's obviously been abusing many people, and actually have that conversation with him and say, dude, what are you doing? And
Using
be a
that
part
influence.
of it. Have you heard of stories like this? Do you know people like this? Because I don't. I want to know them, and I want to shout them out if they're doing it. Do you know anybody?
I think, okay, as soon as you said that, I started thinking about the Caring Well conference. And if you watched any of the videos from Caring Well, which, you know, you may have been in a whole other country at the time. I don't remember even what
I was
year.
in Singapore,
what
but
year
I've read
it was.
about it. Yeah.
So the ERLC, whatever, for the
Religious
SEC,
literacy.
did a conference in, like, aftermath of this, like, all these abuse things that came out.
And the SEC.
And, you know, several things happened that stood out to me. One is Boz Chavision was asked to speak.
I love his take on
I
this
know,
whole conference.
and like he got up there and he's like, what is this? A lanyard where we're like advertising this? We're like promote, like we're making money? Like, what I really want, he said, and he just spoke truth to them.
Yes.
And he's like, what I would really like is for you guys to all like sit down, take a beat, and think through some things before you have a conference. Like, this is not the time for conferences. And like he got up there and said the thing.
Yeah.
And he said, I will speak, but you need to let me say what I'm going to say. And he said, there's two things I want. I want to be able to say what I want to say, and I want to be able to have a drink at the bar afterwards. So you got both of those
Cheers
things.
to Boz.
And I asked him later, I'm like, hey, what'd you do with that lanyard? And he's like, oh, I threw it in the garbage as soon as I could. So I think of that. And then I also think of the fact that they did have a panel conversation that Rachel Denhollander was there.
Right.
And so was Dr. Russell Moore. And he got in trouble for this afterwards, where he gave her a chance to say the thing. She called them out on the stage and shared, like, you all are doing this, but while you're doing this, this other person is, this other situation's happening right now.
Yeah.
What are you doing about it? Like, that is a prophetic, like, people that use their influence and power, that invitation they have into their room.
Yeah.
And they don't squander it. They're like, I'm going to take my shot right here. You know, I'm going to never be asked back again.
Right.
And who cares? Like, they were like, whatever, I don't care if I'm asked back again. I'm going to use this.
Say the thing. Yeah.
Thing.
And I know that some of you watching have some complicated stories around Rachel Denhollander, so we're just going to leave that there.
Yeah.
I know who you are. You've shared things with me.
Yeah.
Some people, I think that if there's anything we understand in this conversation, it's that people can be both helpful and hurtful.
Yeah.
People can be wounded wounders and wounded healers,
Yeah.
and maybe both of those at different times.
Yeah.
We can be both complicit, and let's just be honest, I think all of us are complicit in some way. I confess I shop at Amazon occasionally because it's faster.
Yeah.
When I'm in my faith-based spaces, though, that's the one area where I try really hard to weed out any complicity or collusion as much as I possibly can. And that's really hard to even just take one category of my life and try to do that with integrity. And I just feel like the standards are high, but they should be high. We should want to not be complicit in things that cause other people harm. And I think especially when we don't know what those are. So I want to dig deep a little more into the head in the sand approach that we often run into. And it can be very frustrating when you're somebody who has a lot of knowledge about how, like I think of Harriet Tubman and like literally rescuing people who were enslaved, brought on ships and into forced labor camps into another continent, from Africa to the North American continent. And then when she got out, she was not a head in the sand person, because she had seen it, she had experienced it, she knew what it was. When you've seen things and experienced them, the passion can be different. We don't have the luxury of head in the sand because we've experienced things. Yeah. If there's somebody listening right now and they are just like, I don't even know why I'm here, this is so uncomfortable, la 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 la, I don't want to hear bad things about people that are faith leaders or respectable leaders, what is the most compelling reason you could give them for why they should want to know?
Oh man, that's a hard question.
It is. Or a compelling reason. Maybe not the most.
Compelling reason. I think if you claim the name of Jesus, it's part of our integrity. I mean, if we say we care about truth, right? Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. We believe this. Mm-hmm. And we also believe that we have a sin nature. Even the people we love dearly, even the author, Christian speaker, Christian, the pastor, like, if we actually believe that to be true, and I think I'm like borrowing this from somebody else who said it, like, we have to believe that it's possible they got something wrong. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that just because somebody got something wrong, they are necessarily abusive. There's a difference between somebody that did something really stupid. Right. And can recover from it. Right. And a pattern of behavior. It's a whole different thing. It requires a different sort of response, right? Exactly. But like, if we claim the name of Jesus and we really believe that we are not perfect, mm-hmm. and we're still in this process, mm-hmm. of becoming more like him, right? We need to believe that people can be wrong. And I feel like it's just a part of our integrity. If we want people to like trust us and to see Jesus and be pulled to him through our witness, mm-hmm. we need to be able to say, I'm willing to see the truth, whether it costs me something or not. I'm willing to hear it. It doesn't mean you have a specific thing you have to do, right. But it just says so much about your integrity and your faith, actually. Like, is your faith strong enough? Yes, it should be strong enough to stand, even if you hear something that is really hard to hear. Yeah. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Yeah. It could be hard, but you're going to be okay.
It's a good message. Yeah, I think for those of you who are listening, that you're hearing this, and maybe some of you are a part of, or you profess to be a Christian, you identify as Christian. Maybe you believe the scriptures are infallible, maybe you don't. There's different versions of Christianity. But people, hopefully we can center around the fact that people can be fallible. People can make mistakes, and people can full on like do horrible things. We all have capabilities of doing really, really bad things and hiding that. So whether you are a Muslim and you believe in sin in terms of how Muslims believe it, or you believe you're a Hindu and you just believe that we're trying to live this good life and there's all these options, but you might miss the ideal of what that could look like for you. Or maybe you are not religious at all, like you don't have any faith at all, you are agnostic or you're atheist, but you do believe that as a human we have certain standards and certain morals that we try to live by, and we don't hit those. Hopefully we can all center around, with all of our differences, this notion that as human beings we are not perfect 100% of the time, every single day, 24/7, and we need each other to speak into each other's lives so that we can do better. When we know better, we do better, but if we don't know, we can't do better. And the lack of wanting to know can be very disturbing for Amy and me, because we have people in our lives that are celebrity influencers, making lots of money, have lots of followers, and there are many people that just want to cover their ears and have a head in the sand approach and not hear. Case in point, we came here and we're at this awesome conference, and the Wi-Fi is sponsored by Dave Ramsey, and it costs how much?
$14,000.
So that people can be bought, organizations can be bought. Now, I don't fault anybody here. They may not know anything about Ramsey. That may have just been. How do you think that probably happened? What's your hunch?
Well, I mean, they want to. I mean, I think they see themselves as a media company.
Yeah.
People don't necessarily think of Ramsey as a media company, but they really are a media company, and they want to have credibility in the media world. And so, this is the podcast conference, and so they want to be here to have credibility. And so, having their name out there gives them credibility. Do I expect all the people here to care about all the ins and outs of Dave? I mean, I care about the faith world more caring about it, you know?
Right,
but what's really weird is that oftentimes the secular business world cares more about this sort of integrity.
So secular business world. We love you. I work in there.
Than the faith world, right? Like, and not everybody lives in Nashville and knows what's happening in Nashville. So, you know, people position themselves in such a way that they, you know, they look good. They're offering a service to somebody. And so it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
It is tricky. And I know when money gets involved, once again, judgment-free zone. Many people, and we discussed this last night, we're rooming together here at the Gaylord Rockies Resort in Denver. And we had a little summer party. We went to bed a little later probably than we wanted to because we were talking about all kinds of things. But one of them is like, if you're working, for example, Ramsey Solutions, or you're working in a mega church, and your family's medical insurance and your entire salary depends on this, and it gets a lot trickier. We've talked about this on the podcast before, when it's your faith space and your workspace and your community for yourself and your kids. And mega churches, that's kind of the situation. And then even at Ramsey Solutions, they have worship services there. Families know each other. They have big parties. Like there's a little bit of that element, even though it's a business, right? And so asking somebody to give all of those layers of their life up, it can feel so overwhelming. And so I get the whole, please don't tell me, I don't want to know. But when you have someone who was pregnant and fired and then had to pursue litigation, and she sees that person standing up next to, you know, Dave Ramsey on a stage that she admires, how would she perceive that after what she's gone through?
Yeah, especially when they see the inconsistency. Right, like the pregnant single lady is fired while they cover for the guy that's bringing in millions for Dave. That's a serial adulterer and abuser. It makes absolutely no sense.
No.
But like to what you said though, is that there is a difference in complicity and like what I would expect from like somebody that doesn't actually know all the stuff that's going on in the ins and outs in the organization that may be unhealthy. Like they work in a certain department, they're very protected, they don't know the things, they have no, like, they don't have a lot of power or influence. And say their kid is getting ready to have surgery and their insurance is covered by this organization, and then they hear something and they're like, well, now, are they supposed to just leave their job? They can't afford the life-saving surgery on their own. Like, I mean, there's a world of difference between that and the board member that knows all the things and has seen where the bodies are buried and has helped brought a shovel. And they're making, you know, $400,000 a year, and the reason they don't want to know is because they could never make that much money somewhere else, and they really are comfortable with their life. It's the people call them the golden handcuffs. You know, when you are getting all of these benefits, you don't want to get rid of. Like there's such a huge difference in like what I would expect and what somebody can like emotionally handle. With like processing all the things. Like the board member I have a problem with. The person that's struggling and hardly paying their bills and doesn't know where else they would go, and their kid has a rare disease and they have insurance and like they need some sort of stability right now. Yeah, there's nuance. Like there's no should for what the next step should be for them.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And if you are a board member listening to this, or you're married to a board member, or you're related to, or just know a board member, help them understand that it's a huge responsibility. I actually sit on a board called Justice Revival. We have a meeting later today where we look at like IRS tax forms. We look at like, it's our job. We are required. Do not sit on a board where your voice, it doesn't matter, where you're a yes man or a yes woman, or you're a token, or you're there with golden handcuffs. I know that it's hard to leave, but the complicity that you're experiencing and the amount of people that your decisions could be hurting is significant. There are certain legal responsibilities for boards, even boards of churches, nonprofits, businesses. Like it's a huge don't say yes if you can't say no. And also, and if you are on a board and you can't say no or go against the megachurch pastor or CEO or executive director, if you're not allowed to challenge and give pushback, you need to get out of there, because you are a part of the problem. You're a good person doing nothing, and that's where evil thrives. It's really not that we're always calling out toxic leaders. We're having to understand the system. And so what would you say to someone right now who maybe is considering leaving a toxic work environment and they can't figure out how to make a plan of even step one?
Yeah.
What would be
so
your
scary.
advice?
It's so scary. First of all, like, I get it. We have been there. I've been in the room begging God for clarity and for what to do, and being a little bit afraid.
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot afraid.
Right.
Of like what happens next. No, let's just processing this with my husband. But knowing deep down what we had to do was like leave with no safety net. You know, this is where we decide. Like, if you know the Holy Spirit is saying, I have been complicit, or my staying here sends a message I don't want it to send. I know too much. I can't be here.
Yeah.
I mean, at a certain point, we have to say, do we believe that the Lord will provide for you? Or are we trusting that employer to provide for you? Like, I mean, it's no harder for God to provide for you outside of the walls of that church or that organization than it is inside. I mean, it is scary. I'm not saying that you would not lose money, but like, people do it. People leave.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, there is also an army of people out there that are willing to help, that are willing to, like, literally give their money to help somebody. Literally help pay for a lawyer consult for you if you need one to extricate yourself.
Yeah.
There are people out there. I mean, like, I would much rather give my money to help somebody who needs to leave an organization than to one more damn capital campaign.
Oh my gosh.
Y'all, let's start a nonprofit that just puts our money in helping people leave, like, unhealthy organizations. I don't want to start a nonprofit, but man, I'd give to one. I would give to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are part of a us doing this kind of work,
Hit
let us
us up.
know. Yes, we will send people your way.
We will vet you.
And then we
to
will.
no end.
But don't be afraid. We do know of some great lawyers in high places too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that transparency is just so important, right? Sunshine is the best disinfectant, as they say. And this is what toxic leaders are afraid of. So red flag always is they don't want financial transparency. And this isn't really as possible in the business world. I work in corporate America, I work in tech and global leadership and development. This isn't as possible even in regular nonprofits. It's very possible in the United States with our tax laws and the way you don't have to report things, and you can not even report employees' salaries. We often don't know how much money a mega church pastor makes, or what his slush fund is, or what his house payment that was maybe paid for all by some organization.
Some nonprofit. I mean, like your regular nonprofit,
they
should have to
disclose.
And you can look on GuideStar. They have, like, you set up an account on GuideStar. You can download their tax filings, the 990, and you can see, like, how much money is going to salaries. Like, and you can figure out, like, what percentage of that, what percentage of their income is going to that.
Yeah.
Like, how much is going to the private jet. Like, are they a nonprofit that's actually that's taking in a lot of money, but they're not actually using it to fund services? They're just, like, paying salaries for people?
Yeah.
And what exactly are they doing with that? That salary is paying for them to do what? Like, I mean, ask the question. There is information out there. It's harder to find for churches because churches are not required.
They're not required.
And like a for-profit is required. But there are some nonprofits out there that you guys probably would recognize. I think of like Compassion International.
Yeah.
You could go and look at their 990s and see their highest salaried people they have to list, like their highest salaries.
Right.
And like board members and how much the board members are getting, how much money's coming in, how much money they're spending on different things.
Right.
And you decide, do I want to put my money there?
Yeah, exactly. And some people will say, I think that we come from a faith community that twists certain scriptural verses to say, oh, you shouldn't the interpretation will often be, don't be so nosy, don't be up in other people's business. And there's a lot of stereotypes around women in particular, that a lot of toxic masculinity is like, we don't want women messing with our, like, just leave us alone. But the reality is, often whistleblowers are women. Often women who are somewhat marginalized anyway are seeing things from the outside because they're not in the good old boy club and they're married to the good old boy club or something maybe. But they start to see from the inside, but on the outside of the inside, not at the table, but maybe, on the walls surrounding the table, and so they can observe. And you need to listen to the whistleblowers, because if not, over time, organizations come crashing down when they don't listen to the whistleblowers. Churches can come crashing down. People's lives can get wrecked over and over again, and the truth eventually comes out. So you get to choose how you want the truth to come out. What would you say to somebody who's really skeptical of all whistleblowers, just thinks they're trying to burn everything down, they're nosy, they need to mind their own business, and just, be considerate, pure joy, or whatever. The verses that get twisted. That's a great verse, but it gets twisted.
Well, I mean, that's one verse, right? Yeah. But what would I say? I would say, look at the long history of people that have spoken up. History will prove whether they were right or not.
Yeah.
More often than not, they were right. Mm-hmm. And, why do you not want to know? Why do you not want to know the truth? I was thinking about, even the Me Too. Mm-hmm. It is not an easy thing to speak up. So I want you to think about the number of things, the threats these people face,
right.
The jobs that they lose, the income they lose, the friendships they lose, the community that they lose. There is absolutely nothing to gain for most people in this situation. And so I would consider that when you think that you want to discard the words of whistleblowers. History shows that they were telling the truth.
Yeah. I mean, at least in sexual assault cases, we have some pretty good data around that, right? I think it's depending on the study you look at, 98%-ish, that when people, express Me Too or whatever, that they were sexually assaulted, it's true. And I think that 2 to 3% that is often not is often because the evidence isn't there, because it can be very hard to find the evidence sometimes. So you are, statistically speaking, more likely to be believing the truth when you believe someone who says Me Too or expresses something was wrong, or it's the whole when you see something, say something. Fine if it was wrong, but for the most part, it's typically not in these organizational whistleblowers, because like Amy said, people lose friends. I know people whose families have shunned them and disowned them. Obviously, faith spaces, and even when people believe them, they love being a part of this community. And there's you don't even have to be told by the toxic leader, hey, when so-and-so comes around, don't listen to them. You instinctively know, if I'm friends with that person and I post that on social media, I'm going to get tagged with them. It just turns out my abusive pastors literally told the staff after we left to unfollow us on social media. So there was explicit things said about me. And I was the one fired for them abusing me and me telling them they were, it was just, the whole thing's a hot mess, and you've heard this. But the price people pay to whistleblow, whether it's about them or somebody else, is incredibly high. So instead of the empathy, which is what we often see, is that a toxic male will be given a lot of empathy by creating this sort of Darvo narrative where it's they're the victim. Like, everybody's against me. With those of you who have experienced Acts 29 and Mark Driscoll, a lot of the narrative there was, there's all these helicopters and people after me, and it's making people feel bad for him, when the whole time it's smoke and mirrors and distracting from the people who are, their lives are completely obliterated, and they're trying to pick up those pieces. And so how can somebody shift from that narrative, that Darvo that's so strong that really pulls us in, and our whole society uses it in media and various forms? How can people pull away from that empathy to give empathy toward these survivors and victims and whistleblowers? Do you have any thoughts there?
I think you need to have the courage. I think you need to be brave enough to say, I'm going to sit down and just listen. I'm going to ask them some questions. Somebody that's healthy and a safe person isn't going to require anything of you when they tell you the story. They're not going to dictate what you do next. Be brave enough to have that conversation and just say, hey, Lori, I I was afraid before. I'm ready to hear your story. Can I just hear what you had to say? So that you can take it in. Or maybe it is you just need to find the articles, spend some time looking at it, and talking to some people outside the situation, and just say, what do you see here? Can you help me? Because I don't want to believe this, but I want to believe the truth.
Right.
So somebody that's not connected can say, oh yeah, I have no skin in this game at all. So let me read these articles with you. Let me point out what I see as patterns of issues. Like, oh yeah, this is a pattern. Or they can say, you know what, this is one person that's just, they had a bad day. It's one thing. Yeah. It could be a thing. Keep it in mind. Right. If this becomes a pattern, it's a problem. Right. Did the pastor was he hungry and he didn't sleep very well last night and he said something really stupid? Right. Maybe. That is not abusive.
Right, exactly.
That like he disagreed with somebody in a board meeting, said something stupid. Right. If you start hearing it over and over again, that's a whole other thing. But you need to be willing to just be brave and just hear the story. It doesn't mean you have to like break off your relationships. Right. It does not, there's no specific next right step except for to say, Holy Spirit, show me what to do next. Show me what's true. Yeah. And yeah, it's scary, but I think just be willing to take in the information. What's the worst thing that can happen? Like when you are resistant to even seeing it, reading it, hearing it, it's like a red flag. It's a real red flag for me. Like, I do not have, like, if somebody hears my story, I would just love them to listen to it. I do not have any expectation on what happens next. Yeah. But I would love for you to be brave enough to listen. To listen and engage with it, and then decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah. And if you are looking for a tip, I know sometimes, people have friends that have lost a loved one, and there's like, what should I say or not say? Well, in this situation, when it comes to the survivor community of abuse, if something just as simple as, I believe you, is just a great statement of what you could say, and it means the world to a survivor to be believed. Because often survivors aren't believed. Often survivors are discredited, they experience Darvo, they experience ongoing abuse from power dynamics where they are very much not at the top. Yeah. Often people whistleblowing are not the CEOs, they're not the executive directors, they're not the president, they're not the mega church pastor. The people who whistleblow are middle management or lower oftentimes. It gets a little trickier even with senior management and executive positions, and then obviously boards often are just circling the wagons, and that's what they're trained to do. That's why they were chosen, is because they would be silent and they would be complicit and they'd be part of the collusion, right? So I'm gonna interject here for just a second and say, this is personal for us. Like, it is. We haven't just been whistleblowers. Yeah. We have been and even recently, I had somebody reach out to me. Somebody like I'm not super close to, but that I've become like connected to and friends with on the internet. And they're like, you know what, I hesitated to say this because I know about your connection with such and such a person, but I just want you to know about this thing that happened. You know what, did I want to hear it? No, I did not. But this was a chance for me. Am I going to have integrity or not? Like, I hate it. Yeah. I hate it so much. But you know what I had to say? I had to say, I believe you. And I'm so sorry that happened. She did not require anything of me. She did not say, here's what you need to do next. Right. And what I do then is I go to my trusted people outside of the situation and say, this sucks. Help me process this. And then they can be, reasonable about the whole situation, and they can say, yeah, keep this in mind, or here's what I see here. Here's what I see that doesn't worry me. Here's what I see that does worry me. Yeah. Like, this is an ongoing thing for us. Like, we are going to get messages and emails that say, I saw you with so-and-so. Yeah. Can I tell you this story? And we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is and say, I'm willing to hear it. Yeah. I've had that happen a couple of times as a podcast host already.
Yeah. And it doesn't, it may be just a personality conflict. Maybe. And that's fine, but it's absolutely true whatever happened. I mean, it's a real thing that happened. Right. And so we have to deal with the thing of like, how do I recategorize that person in my mind? And what does it mean for me? It's the absolute worst, but our integrity requires it.
Exactly. No, I hate it too, and I don't want to know it. And I got roped into even an article I was written up in. I mean, not written up in. I was.
Were you written up?
I was not written up. I was not in the naughty chair in first grade. I did not have to sit in the corner, write my name on the board. No, I was in an article where I was interviewed about my abuse, and that article also included another person at a church who had abused someone else. And I had had a connection with that person and didn't know anything bad had gone on. And so I had to read that article, listen to them, message with that person, realize there were other stories. I mean, I had to dig into things that, I was dealing with my own stuff. I didn't want another problem, but it was a person I had endorsed in a particular way. And that's happened a couple times. But part of it is like, I do believe people should be held accountable. And I don't believe in enabling people to abuse their power. Just like I don't believe in enabling people to abuse alcohol or anything that people might be addicted to, food, right? So like I would not hand somebody I know struggles with alcohol, and I have a friend here, she's been on the podcast, she talks about her sobriety journey. I would never, at one of our parties, show up and hand her a glass of wine. I know that's her weakness. I would never, ever do that. So handing someone power that's addicted to power, or me be a part of giving someone power, I'm a person who gives power away. I believe in the power of giving power away. I would not overtly do that with somebody who struggles with it. Let's talk about power dynamics for a second, though. Amy, how would you compare your power in the Ramsey organization to Dave Ramsey? There's you, and there's Dave Ramsey. Some people will say he said, she said, and put people, a whistleblower and this powerful, usually man, on the same level. He said, she said. Why is that a difficult and troubling way to approach it from your perspective and your power dynamic?
Well, what's interesting, if you've read Celebrities for Jesus by Caitlin Beatty, she talks about how people have this sort of influence without proximity. And there's a lot of people that just give an automatic pass to people that have a certain amount of power and like influence in the world, and they think they must be good. They already are that many steps ahead, and they're connected to all the powerful people and all the things, and so there's already this hurdle that somebody like me that nobody knows. Who is Amy Fritz? Why should I believe her? I trust this person whose podcast I listen to every day about my finances. It tells me that this is Jesus' way to do things. There's already that hurdle. And so, that's another reason why I think you should, take a beat and listen to the whistleblower. Because they have, they know most people aren't going to believe them.
Right.
And like we said before, there's nothing. There's nothing to gain. And often in the he said, she said, I have to tell you, there's many more of the people that said the thing against the person of power than just one voice oftentimes.
Right.
And so
like he said, they said.
And the other thing is it's not just that they said. It's here's the documentation.
Right. There's receipts.
Look at the depositions. Look at the things said under oath. Listen to the audio recordings.
Right.
Read the transcripts. This isn't just my perspective, their perspective. Right. There's actual tangible things that you can look at and take everything else off the table, like how much you like or dislike somebody, and just look at the facts. That may be where you start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So those of you who are out there listening and you're like, oh, Dave Ramsey must be in the right because he's still got a big organization, or Andy Wood must be right because he's pastor of Saddleback. I have people that, were either acquaintances or a few that were even friends from my church. It's automatically it must be that Andy's right because they asked him to go lead a huge mega church. It's if you understand the dynamics of power and how it can be abused, and you understand how people can climb a ladder, especially under patriarchy, which hurts men and women and children. It hurts us all. When you have systems that are built to oppress and give a fast track to people who have toxic behaviors and hold back people with integrity who could have had decades of good character, but just happen to be a woman or happen to not be cutthroat, and it's not always true. I don't believe this is true, but that good guys sometimes finish last. I do overall believe the research that shows being good, having integrity, having character is better leadership. Over time, the people who are toxic, they're going to fall at some level.
Yeah.
It may be a Ravi Zacharias situation, for those of you who are familiar with that, where he went to the grave and never really faced consequences for his actions. But I think most people eventually do in this life.
Yeah.
For those of us who believe in a judgment after life or who don't, either way, there are consequences to be paid, whether it's here, the generations that come after you. When you meet the ancestors, how are they going to respond to you? That's up to you. You have some choices in this life. And we have choices of whether or not to be complicit or to collude with people we know have harmed us, our friends, and our loved ones.
Yeah.
To say, enough is enough. And so people often will ask, probably you, because I get asked that sometimes, well, why do you keep talking about it? What is your answer to that?
And some days I don't ever want to, I just don't want to talk about it again. And
Same.
Because it kind of feels, I don't walk away feeling like energized. This is not energizing.
No.
I talk about it if I think people are continuing to be harmed, and there's some hope, right?
Yeah.
It's when somebody had said this about people, and I don't know, I wish I remember who it was. It's like, you need to worry. Oh yeah, it was Allie Henny, who's on my podcast, who was talking about race issues, and she says that white friend of yours, or she said actually, when your person of color friend just stops talking and stops saying or challenging things, then you're in trouble. Because they've given up on you.
Yeah.
They know there's no hope for you to learn the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think we keep speaking and keep talking because we have hope.
Yeah.
And we haven't given up on there being some sort of goodness.
Yeah.
And some restoration that happens and justice that is brought. That's why we speak. That's why we do. And there's a thing in us that wants that.
Yes.
I think it's the image of God in us. I'm going to say that. That we want goodness to reign in the end. And that's let's never have to talk about it again. That would be amazing. I would love to be at that place.
I long for that day too.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with my husband recently, because we have days, weeks, months where we just think, I should never want to think about this again. I never want a single moment to take this space in my brain.
Yeah.
But that feels like a privilege and a luxury that we don't have when more stories are coming out. More current stories are happening in our previous church. More people's lives are being, wrecked, and they're having to deal with the nuclear bomb that just went off in their life. And it's hard to be, some of the two who didn't sign the NDA who can speak. We have each other. We're stronger. We have, families that support us and haven't disowned us. We have a lot of privilege in the situation where we could, but it's still exhausting. It's still involved a lot of therapy and coaching and support groups and reading and studying and lots of cohorts. We've had to do a lot for ourselves to heal and to handle stories from other people that come to us. That's not easy. We don't love talking about it, but I agree. This is what it came down to in my conversation with my husband. I still have hope. I kind of wish I didn't. It would be so much easier to be like, I don't have hope. This is never going to change. I'm going to stop talking about it. If I ever stop talking about it and these people are still doing what they're doing, you'll know that I've lost hope. I hope it doesn't happen for me.
Yeah.
How do you keep hope? And is there any secret to it, or does it just come naturally? Do you feel like it just happens?
I will defer to Dr. Diane Langberg. She says
The queen.
She has to look at beautiful things, but she sees so much ugly. Mm-hmm. She has to purposefully turn her gaze towards the things that bring her that are life-giving. Mm-hmm. Being in her garden, being with her grandchildren. Mm-hmm. It is so, so important because there is beauty in the world.
There is beauty in the world. Well, I'm grateful for you, Amy. I'm grateful for the beauty that you exude, that you speak about, that you call us to, that you have a vision of in your brain. I'm blessed to live near redwoods. They're gorgeous, and they're their own sermon. And the way they connect with their roots underneath is how they're so strong. They're so kind of fragile when you kind of look at them and feel them, but they grow very tall, and they weather California storms, which we have a lot, fires.
Yeah.
But their interconnectedness is how they stay so strong. And they're beautiful and they're inspiring. We have cliffs 15 minutes from our home, this beautiful ocean in California, and the way the waves hit, and it's constant, and it's beautiful. And that beauty has sustained my husband and I, but also people that have been in this community with me, like you, Amy, the way you podcast, the way you kind of shine a light and continue to shine a light, believing that the darkness will not overcome it, but that if we don't hide it under a bush, the little song a lot of us were taught to sing,
Yeah.
if we let our light shine, I do believe we will see beautiful things start to happen. It's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's going to take not head in the sand, but I appreciate you and all
Thank
that you
you.
do to shine a light. Thanks for being here today.
You are welcome. I think about the verse that says that we'll see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That is our hope.
It is
And
our
I'm
hope.
not giving up on that.
I'm not either.
So.
Thank you, Amy. Fist bump
Thank
to you.
you.
Untangled
This was
Faith.
fun.
A
Thank
World
you
of
guys.
Difference podcast, your podcast movement. We're going to enjoy our next few days here and lots of learning.
Yeah, we've got some more sessions to go to.
We do.
Be reminded of all the things some things we knew and didn't do that aren't doing that we need to be
Yes.
reminded of.
We're
and
getting
some other
better.
things, so.
Thanks for staying with us today, everybody.
Thanks,
and
guys.
keep making a difference wherever you are. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys. Thanks.